very much, Evan. I appreciate it. So let me jump right into the talk. I want to talk today about the evolving value of advice and what clients look for when they hire a financial advisor. So the basic question, the research question we were after is, why do clients hire a financial advisor in the first place? And when we look across existing commentary, it suggested that people seek out financial advisors to deal with particular issues like retirement planning or a windfall or maybe increased income, something along these lines. And it's not that these are wrong per se, but these foci are rather specific and they suggest a narrow job to be done mentality. And unfortunately, these are superficial answers that overlook different sources of value from financial advice. We're not the first to say this. So there's this fabulous study that comes from Merrill Lynch, which is a meta-analysis looking at lots of different other studies that have been conducted, looking at the kind of value creating activities that advisors do for their clients. So on the left there, you see all these different things that advisors might do. And for example, asset allocation, behavioral coaching, and so on. And then different studies in the industry have looked at the impact that this can have on clients' portfolios. And these are estimated BIPs per annum. Now, there's lots of different sources of value, but one thing that jumps out is the value of behavioral coaching, these kinds of soft skills. So on average, there's about 200 or so BIPs of value that's created from this. And this is very different than the narrow job to be done mentality. This isn't the only source for it. Vanguard has additional research along these lines, calling it advisor alpha, and different source of value that's created for clients based on good financial advice. And again, Vanguard's finding very similar things, that behavioral coaching creates a great deal of value for people. So this was one thing we noted in a piece of research we did a couple of years ago. We were looking at all the different things that people could have in financial advice and then asking them to start to rank order what they value. And one surprise we saw in our research was that these sorts of things of behavioral coaching or helps me stay in control of my emotions, which we know creates a lot of value for clients, are actually the sorts of things that are ranked very low for clients. So this is not the sort of thing that people are looking for, at least explicitly, when they are hiring a financial advisor. This is a bit of a problem. So I have a background in economics, and we have these models that say markets are populated by perfectly rational decision agents. This shouldn't happen, right? People should know what creates value, and this is what they should be willing to pay for. But there's a little bit of a mismatch between where value comes from and what clients might be looking for. So with this said, behavioral coaching is a tough sell. And paradoxically, some of the soft skills that are the foundation for some of the best sources of value in financial advice. But at the same time, these capabilities are not what people have top of mind, nor what they articulate when they are looking for professional financial services. And when I say not top of mind, for some of these things, it actually means bottom of the heap. So that was our research motivation for this particular study, this new research I want to show you. We know that some of the greatest sources of value from financial advice are not intuitively appealing to people. So then maybe if we better understood people's motivations and did so in their own words, and this is a point I'll get back to in a little bit more, then maybe we could better tailor value propositions to better reach investors, engage them, and compel them to make good decisions. So the simple question we asked people is, list some reasons why you hired your financial advisor. Now notice that this is an open-ended question. We're not just giving people a list. We're not asking them to rate things on a scale of 1 to 7 or something like that. This is a legitimate way to approach some research questions, but there's limitations to it as well. For this research, we wanted to try something different and use these open-ended questions, and like I was saying before, allow people to articulate in their own words what they're looking for. The research was administered on the Prolific platform, which is an online platform where people can go in, answer questions, and this is a way for us to gather data. And we engaged 623 households that are currently working with a financial advisor. So these are households that are investing, they're paying an advisor, they've hired one, and they continue to have an ongoing relationship with that advisor. One last thing is that this data comes from answering anonymously. And so I think that's a different kind of insight that potentially we could get from these data than if you, as an advisor, were to ask one of your clients why they are hiring, right? So in that situation, there's a lot of social pressure. They may not be as forthright as they could be. One of the advantages we have here is that we're not a party to this, we're outside of it. And also people are engaging with us anonymously. And that might give us a little bit more candid answers to be able to look at and examine. So these are the kind of data we see. when we ask people to list reasons why they hired their financial advisor. People say things like, two minds are better than one. I just play around with my money, but he does it for a living. To help keep my money safe now that I'm retired, to see if we're on track for retirement. And I wanted to be sure that I'm investing in good choices. One of my favorites from the set I didn't have here is, why did you hire your advisor? Well, the answer is because he's my dad, right? So there's lots of reasons people have for hiring a financial advisor, and those individual differences, a little bit of those stories start to come out in these answers. That's a really good thing. You start to get more detail, more nuance. You start to understand what people are motivated by, and they're doing so in their own words. But one of the drawbacks is that these are the data that we have to analyze. And it's not as though you can put these kinds of pile of words into an Excel sheet and be able to find an average or find some structure. It takes more sophistication to tease out meaning, to understand what's going on in there. So in order to deal with this, we use some new tools that have come online recently in the last 5 to 10 years. And this helps us meet the challenge of distilling these 623 households' responses into something that's more comprehensible. So we use something called an LLM, a large language model, with LDA, latent Dirichlet allocation, which is an advanced statistical technique to identify and find general themes and topic clusters that people mention when explaining their intentions. So for example, if one person says that they feel anxious, if another uses the word worried, another says scared, and so on, immediately you can see that these are all along the idea of anxiety that people might have for why they're hiring an advisor. That's useful, but you notice they're also different words. This approach we're using here would find that that's a cluster, that there's some sort of similarity in those answers and be able to identify that. And that's quite powerful when you look at data that's open-ended. It's not as though we take the data and just throw it at the algorithm and completely trust the results. We also cross-validated this. We used several human expert raters, and all of the raters, both the human and the artificial intelligence raters, converged on the same reported categorical structure. So what this allows us to do then is take a large pile of words, like I showed you before, and be able to turn that into a structure that looks something like this. So these are the categories or the reasons that we have at a high level that address the problem of, why did you hire a financial advisor? There's a little bit of structure immediately we noticed, and I've ordered them in such way now. Some of these tend to be more emotional for why people hire an advisor. Some of these are more financial or more transactional. So take a moment to look over these, if you will, and imagine you're trying to answer this question: why do people hire their financial advisors? And if I put you on the spot and had the benefit of calling on someone who is sitting in the first row, what would you guess? What would you say? Go ahead and take a minute. Maybe write down your answer on a piece of paper next to you, what you think is going to be the most common thing that comes out at the top, and they're lettered there at the side. So part of the reason I do this is twofold. Part of the reason to get you thinking, engage you a little bit. And the second reason is more selfish. Because sometimes when we show results from the behavioral sciences, people say, oh yeah, that makes sense, that was obvious. It's not so obvious before you get to see the results. And this is one of those studies where we looked at it quite a bit and thought about it, and it wasn't obvious to us what was going to come out on top. There were lots of different reasons we could imagine, and we were curious, actually quite curious, to see what the results entailed. Okay, so at this point, you should have at least made a bold conjecture. Let's find out how you did. If any of you guessed A or H, congratulations. These are the most common categories that people give as reasons. A has to do with client discomfort, handling financial issues, and issue H is specific financial needs or goals. These are the top 5. So these are the 2 I just showed you: discomfort and specific task or need. And then it's followed by behavioral coaching, recommendation, and the quality of the relationship. So we see about 32% of the reasons that people give entail some sort of discomfort or a specific task or need. About 17% of the time, we see people mentioning behavioral coaching. About 12% of the time, people cite a recommendation as to why they hired, and quality of the relationship about 10% of the time. Let me put in some of the examples. These are responses people had and give you some idea of how these are categorized. So, discomfort, people are saying things like they feel more secure having a different view on their finances. Some people are pretty explicit that they don't like making financial decisions or they don't feel they know enough to make the best decisions. So, all of these highlight the discomfort that people feel and part of the reason they seek out professional services. Specific task and need, these are much more specific. For example, someone says they need help setting up an annuity or to better understand taxes or income management. Again, a very specific job to be done. And those are common. Like I said before, about 32% of the time, this is one of the major reasons that people are citing. Behavioral coaching comes in next. People say things like, I lack discipline to stay invested when the markets are erratic. People are looking for a sane voice to be an expert to bounce ideas off of. One thing that's worth noting is that although behavioral coaching is cited, part of the things people are looking for, that phrase never was used in the 10,000 words we gathered from these households. I'm not saying that it was rare. I'm telling you that it was never within the data set. So when we in the industry talk about behavioral coaching and its benefits, that's useful as we communicate with each other. But when we start to talk to end clients, investors, this is not the language they use to describe it. And I think that's notable. There are particular ways in which they talk about it and in which they're referencing it, and people are looking for this as a source of value. However, we have to be careful in how we highlight it, because if there's a mismatch between how we talk about it and how they talk about it, there could be some misperceptions. One thing that's notable is that the amount of, when you look across these different categories, that 4 out of the 5 are very emotional in nature. So you can see that here. Discomfort, behavioral coaching tends to be emotional. Recommendations tend to be emotional as well. Almost always people are citing a close relationship, loved one, family, some sort of trust relationship that they have with someone, and that's part of the driver for why they choose to hire a particular advisor. All right. And that was, I think, one takeaway from the study is that many of the reasons that at the superficial level tend to be specific task or need. But when you look a little bit closer, a lot of the reasons are much more emotional as to why people are hiring a financial advisor. Okay. Summary so far. Investors tend to overlook major sources of value from advisors. But when you start to dig into the data a little bit, you see that there's a richer picture that emerges. It's not so simple, the answers they give, but there's more complexity to it. So at this point, what are you going to do about it is a legitimate question. And that's one of the things I really like about our job in the behavioral sciences in industry setting, is that we have a chance to take the research to the next step and try and address this question. From an academic standpoint, this might be where we stop. We have the results, we publish them, we dust our hands and move on. But I think there's a legitimate question. The person who sits there in the front row and raises their hand and says, yeah, so what? So what do I do with this, that we try and address? So that's where we turned and we looked at the results and started to try and understand how could we better describe or explain major parts of the value proposition in ways that are more intuitively appealing to people. So what we did is when we looked across the results and the categories and the population of those different categories, we identified 3 general ways in which you as the advisor could start to address these with your clients. So first is acknowledging client discomfort, handling financial issues. So clients are pretty clear. They lack confidence in their own skills that are needed to reach their financial goals, and or they lack the knowledge regarding financial and investing issues. People recognize this. There's an asymmetry of expertise, and that's part of the reason they're hiring an advisor, is to help compensate for that. They're not experts, and they want that expertise to weigh in to help them make better decisions and to feel more confident in doing so. Second, behavioral coaching. People tend to recognize that they need help, sometimes acting in ways that are beneficial for their own financial plans, including explaining what the financial plan is doing. And this is where they looking to cut through the jargon and understand the why of what they're investing in and how that helps them reach their long-term goals. Helping motivate them to stick to their plan over time, and also providing guidance as to what to do and what not to do during certain financial situations. And the third category has to do with specific financial needs. And this is a need for particular financial issues to be addressed, like retirement planning, handling new wealth, tax planning. The specifics, this is much more functional and more of the nuts and bolts. So let's imagine these 3 things here, these motivations that people have and ways to address them as a lens. And we start to try and then take apart a value proposition you might find and to see the degree to which it's meeting these three motivations. So let's imagine a particular value proposition, right? So let me read this to you here. At Murphy Wealth, I like it so far, good name. We are driven to provide clients with the best professional financial advice to meet their financial aspirations. With 20 years of professional service, we are uniquely qualified to address your financial needs, whether that be retirement planning, tax management, wealth accumulation, or more. What do you think of this? So when I've shown this before, the answer is kind of a shrug. Audience members, they're not too hostile, but they say things like, yeah, it's kind of bland, kind of humdrum. Yeah. Could you imagine seeing something like this on a web page? Sure. As part of an email? Absolutely. But it really doesn't land. It doesn't really resonate, probably. Okay, so back to the challenge. Based on these empirically driven motivational lens that we have here, this discomfort, behavioral coaching, specific financial needs, can we start to take apart a value proposition and redevelop it such that it more naturally resonates with what people are looking for? So something along these lines. So let's think the value proposition and start to rewrite it a little bit. So here we are back at Murphy Wealth. We are committed to helping you achieve your financial goals. Right. So this is one motif that comes up in our research repeatedly, whether or not we look for it or not. And if you were to go away from this talk and remember one word from it, it would be this idea of goals. It's worth remembering that being an investor is hard and somewhat unnatural, given how people are wired. Investing requires patience, delaying gratification by putting resources away and not spending them. And it also requires that people embrace irreducible uncertainty and are able to have risk and reward. Both of these things, patience and uncertainty, are things that we're not naturally well wired for. So why would anyone do this to themselves? Well, goals. This idea that people are investing to try and reach something bigger beyond where they are now, and that can be a powerful motivator as people think about investing. The more you can do this and articulate this, that's the goal of investing, that helps people understand what they need to do and helps them resonate a little bit more with the value proposition. So if you can work that into how you're explaining what you're providing as a service, that works rather well. So next line here, along the way, we make sure to provide clients with the education and guidance they need to stay on track with their financial plan. Notice we're describing here behavioral coaching, but we're not actually mentioning the word behavioral coaching. We talk about education and guidance. We talk about helping people stay on track. Notice that phrase by itself is already goal-centric. Here's where we are, here's where we're pointed, and there's a destination we're aiming for. So that goal centricity can even follow through into the language we use to try and talk to people about what the investing process is like. Throughout your financial journey, we will help you navigate financial decisions, whether that be related to retirement planning, tax management, wealth accumulation, or more, all with your financial goals in mind. So notice again how we've bookended this. Again, goal centricity is the core language here, but at the same time acknowledging that people feel uncomfortable, and that's part of what they're buying as a service, is ways to feel more confident and tamp down those feelings of uncertainty. Behavioral coaching is part of that they are hiring someone who will be there with them on the journey, answer questions, provide education and guidance, and their specific needs. That sometimes is the thing that people are looking to solve at the superficial level, but really what they're dealing with is more discomfort. Okay. So one thing you can do is start to tune your own value proposition to better fit what people are seeking. So think about the ways in which you can identify these top issues, how you're talking to your clients about discomfort, specific financial needs, and behavioral coaching. And think about ways in which you can work these topics into your messaging. Keep it simple, make it easy, and highlight the relevance. Keep it simple. One thing we found in a different line of research that's new and just coming out here is that jargon is a trust killer. We knew that jargon could be a little bit off-putting for people, but we didn't realize how specifically that undermines and cuts away at trust. And arguably, trust is one of the most valuable assets you have with your clients. So jargon not only creates a barrier of comprehension, but also can undermine that trust, which is really important. Think about ways in which you can de-jargon your value propositions and communications. Maybe even have additional people who are not part of the industry read over things to make sure that it's written in a language that they understand. Make it easy, help people know what they need to do today to get where they want to go, and highlight the relevance. Why are we doing this as investors? Well, to reach goals. That sort of relevance, I think, is helpful for people to understand why they're doing what they're doing. Much of this falls under the rubric of something called choice architecture, or this idea of a nudge. And that's what the little icon is there on the bottom. There's a fabulous book around this topic called Nudge by Thaler and Susting, talking about lots of different ways in which people can be helped to make better decisions. And it doesn't require that we have to teach people to be rational or educate them, explicitly a priori, but rather there's in the moment things that we can do to help people make better decisions, often by structuring the environment and talking to them in a language that resonates more naturally with how they're already thinking about things. So one of the takeaways I want to leave you with this talk is this particular worksheet. And so we have a white paper with the research I just presented here going through the details, but we wanted to make it really hands-on, something that you could use yourself in your own practice. And so this is a worksheet which you can download and try out. And I would challenge you to consider looking at the value proposition, maybe the language you use on your web page or your emails, and start to think of it through these three lenses we highlighted. Look at it maybe with fresh eyes, refresh it. So I'm sure it's pretty good at the moment, but there's always a chance to make it better. And so here's a chance to start to read through and to see where you're ticking off, dealing with people's discomfort, highlighting the value of behavioral coaching and what specific needs or things that they're after. And think of ways in which you can improve your value proposition and the language you use with folks. We've done this exercise with several advisors, going through and revisiting what they had written as their documentation and tested that. So we've done some recent work with advisors where they've used the previous version they had and an updated version. And we're seeing some evidence that this tends to drive engagement. It makes people more keen to take action, reduces the amount of uptime for people to be able to be onboarded as clients. So all of these things that we can do to try and smooth out the language of what people are seeking and make sure it resonates really helps, not only just from the standpoint of facilitating the relationship with clients, but also from a business standpoint of bringing them on board faster and more effectively. All right, high level summary. So soft skills via hard science. So soft skills are exceedingly important. The more that we better understand investors, understand their motivations, understand how to engage them, this creates a lot of value. It creates value for advisors as they're creating a service, and it creates quite a bit of value for investors as they're trying to navigate the complexity of marketplaces and achieve their long-term goals. Soft skills, though, are not just sort of armchair philosophy or doing whatever sort of feels intuitive as an advisor. There's a lot of work that we can do, a lot of serious, hard science comes out of behavioral science and other fields to better understand how to engage with folks and how to effectively nudge them to make better choices. So notice the data sets here. We're coming from engaging with 600 or so households to understand what their motivations are. That I think is really powerful. So given the power of soft skills, being able to tune them and hone them based on these scientific insights, I think is something that our team is very much committed to and something that I think there's great promise in. We would argue that your value as an advisor is evolving, and we try and show how to explain major parts of your value proposition and do so in a way that's much more intuitively appealing to people. And we think that this reframing accentuates your value and drives investor engagement that adds to your practice. And all of this facilitates that kind of engagement and investors doing what they need to do to get where they want to go. And that promotes investor success. And that's part of all what we're trying to achieve. All right, this is what I wanted to cover with you today. Thank you very much. I look forward to the discussion and questions, and we can go from there.